All right, welcome. Let's be clear from the start. This isn't just another explainer. I want you to think of this as a direct audit, an audit of your command. We're opening the doors to the silent archive. So, let's get right to the core of this. The archive, it operates on this really stark principle. Wanting something, well, that's not a sign of ambition. It's a confession of lack. It's basically a high entropy signal that you are not in control of the variable.
Okay, so to kick off this audit, we first have to make a diagnosis. We're looking at the primary failure of what we'll call the unrefined mind, and we're going to examine wanting, but not as some simple desire. No, we're treating it as a pathological state, a systemic failure.
You probably believe your dreams, your desires, give you direction, right? Well, according to this framework, that's a fundamental misunderstanding of power. See, the system itself actually thrives on your desire. It needs you to be perpetually wanting things so it can just steer you right into its own consumption cycles. And here's another idea this framework just completely dismantles: motivation. We all do it, right? We wait for that feeling of motivation to kick in before we act. But according to the archive, relying on that is like waiting for the wind to change when you should be building an engine. This next point, it's a harsh diagnosis, but it's meant to be clinically precise. It says that most of us are biological beggars. We just wait. We wait for the environment or our own emotions to give us permission, that feeling we need to finally act. We don't decide, we just react.
And this slide really frames those two states of being perfectly. On one side, you've got the architect. This is the one who decides, who has true authority, an immovable will. But on the other side, you have the passenger. This is the one who just reacts, wasting all their energy negotiating with their own fear and hesitation. And the argument here is that most people live their entire lives on the right side of this chart.
And that question, it's not meant to be philosophical. It's a prompt. I want you to try and identify a tangible physical sensation. That cold, hollow friction, that's the feeling of your own sovereignty being liquidated. It's being dissolved by a single word, maybe.
Okay, so if wanting is the sickness, then what's the cure? We're moving from diagnosis now to prescription. We're entering the realm of the proposed solution, a fundamental law called absolute command.
Now, this is the crucial point, the redefinition of will. See, in the archive, your will isn't an emotion, it's a localized force of nature, almost like gravity. It's the state where the gap, the delta, between your thought and your action becomes zero. Because true authority doesn't want something to happen, it commands it.
And this isn't just philosophy, It's framed as physics. This governance is quantified through something called the command constant, omega sub c. This is presented as the actual governing formula that measures your personal sovereignty.
So let's actually break this equation down. Look at the top, the numerator. That's the force of your command. You have I command, which is the raw pressure of your will, and delta V volition, the sheer volume of your neural commitment. But down in the denominator, that's the predator. You've got R resistance, your own internal biological and emotional friction, and theta hesitation. That's the time you waste between intent and action. The goal is simple, really. Maximize the top and absolutely eliminate the bottom.
And if you master this equation, the outcome is what's called volitional autonomy. When your omega C hits that systemic absolute, you feel the world's resistance, sure, but it's like a soundless friction that just can't slow you down. This is what absolute command is. It's the act of turning your prefrontal cortex into a sovereign throne. You stop trying, you just execute, with the cold, clinical inevitability of a law of physics.
But what happens if you fail? What if you can't master this law? What's the alternative? Well, this next section introduces the consequence. We're going to look at the shadow state of the unrefined mind.
And it's a powerful and frankly cautionary image, the vibrating slave. This is someone who's trapped in what's called decisional dissipation. They're spending all of their metabolic energy planning, thinking, worrying, but the motor in their mind is totally disconnected from the gears of action. It's all heat, all noise, but zero forward movement. And look at this timeline. It shows the whole tragic progression. It starts out looking productive, right? Age 25, preparing, planning, thinking. But by 35, that's curdled into chronic inaction, decisional dissipation. And then by 45, the realization hits. You've just been a passenger the whole time.
Now, this isn't seen as just an internal failure. The idea is that external systems actually cultivate this state in you. They feed you endless options and choices precisely to keep you from ever committing to one single sovereign path. They sell you this illusion of safety in the middle ground, which the archive calls the very site of your liquidation.
And this is the final, damning verdict on that state. The moment you start negotiating with yourself, should I do it? Maybe later. The battle is already lost. Command doesn't negotiate.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the sickness, we've defined the law, and we've seen the consequences of failure. So now we're going to turn from theory to practice. Let's look at the actionable protocol for actually becoming the architect of your own will.
The protocol is laid out here in 3 pretty distinct steps. Step 1, negotiation liquidation. You audit your internal dialogue, you kill that debater inside, and you birth the sovereign. Step 2, the zero-delay decree. This is about practicing immediate, 5-second execution. You make your will faster than your fear. And finally, step 3, you build the sovereign throne. You structure your life in such a way that your commands become self-sustaining. They gain their own inertia.
And this brings us right back to those 2 paths. But now, we're looking at them from age 45. The choice is, well, it's stark. On one side, you're the friction. You're the passenger with no command, no gravity. Or you're the architect. You've become an inertia of command. You are the inevitable end of the debate.
And so the final statement from the archive, it's not advice, it's not a question, it's a declaration, it's a law with all the cold finality of physics. The archive is absolute. Your audit is complete.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a really powerful framework for understanding and hopefully overcoming indecision. This comes straight from the Silent Archive. And look, this isn't just about making a few better choices, it's about completely rewiring the nature of your will. So let's get right into it. So, right out of the gate, the source comes at us with a pretty radical idea. It basically attacks this belief we all have that wanting something is a sign of strength. Instead, it flips that on its head and says desire is actually a confession of weakness. It's you admitting that you're powerless, just waiting for the world to line up perfectly before you'll let yourself act.
And it gets a name, a pretty intense one, the pathological state of wanting. See, this isn't about motivation. This is a state of being what the text calls a biological beggar. Think about that. You're just reacting to whatever your environment throws at you, hoping for the right feeling, waiting for the right moment, instead of creating it yourself through a sheer act of decision.
So, if the state of wanting is the disease, then what's the symptom? Well, the source gives it a name, a really powerful archetype that's born from all this chronic indecision, the vibrating slave.
And this is such a powerful image. Just picture a motor, spinning like crazy, just whining at high speed, but it's completely disconnected from the gears. It's generating all this heat, all this noise, but there is zero forward movement. That's the feeling. That's the person who never got around to architecting their own will.
There's even a clinical-sounding term for this condition, decisional dissipation. It's basically the process where all your potential, all your energy for action just gets burned up in the friction of thinking about it forever. You spend your whole life preparing, thinking, and planning, but you don't realize that planning without command, well, that's just a fancy term for procrastination. You aren't stuck. You are the friction.
And it's not just an internal battle. The source argues that the systems around us, media, consumer culture, you name it, they're kind of designed to feed on that hesitation. They throw endless options and choices at you to keep you locked in a state of maybe, because if you never commit to one single sovereign path, you never become a real force to be reckoned with.
Okay, so to fight back against this shadow state, we first have to understand its polar opposite. The source calls this the law of sovereignty, and it is the absolute foundation of command.
This right here is a fundamental mind shift. The big idea is that your will, it isn't a fleeting feeling like being motivated or wanting something. No, it can be trained and built into a governing force, something as consistent and as inevitable as a law of physics, but inside your own life. This slide just lays it out so clearly. On the left, you see what strengthens your command, the intensity of your decision, your actual neural commitment to it. But the real game changer is that last one, zero-delay execution. And on the right, you see what kills it, your own body's resistance, emotional friction, and, this is the most important one, the hesitation gap. That tiny little space between thought and action is where command goes to die.
All right, so we've diagnosed the problem. We understand the governing law. Now for the cure. To actually claim that sovereignty and escape the shadow of the vibrating slave, the source lays out a very clear three-part command protocol.
The whole process starts with a shift in your identity. You have to stop asking for permission from yourself. You have to stop negotiating with your own doubts. There's a great line in this source. A will that negotiates is a will already defeated. You have to move from being a requester in your own mind to being the commander.
And here is that protocol. Step 1. Negotiation liquidation. You have to audit your internal dialogue. If you find yourself trying to convince yourself to do something, it is not a command. The source is blunt. Kill the debater. Step 2. The zero delay decree. Practice 5-second execution. Just act before your fear even has time to register. And finally, step 3. The sovereign throne. This is about building a life where your commands create their own momentum, a self-sustaining force that governs your reality.
So you've got these two paths, right? Hesitation on one side, command on the other. And they don't just run side by side. They diverge, and they lead to two dramatically different outcomes.
The source brings up a specific age, 45, and it's used as this sort of symbolic tipping point. It's that moment in life where the accumulated consequences of the path you've been on become stark and completely undeniable.
And this is where it all comes to a head. The two fates. The vibrating slave finally realizes they've just been a passenger in their own life. They have no command, no personal gravity. They're all friction, no movement. But the architect, they've become an inertia of command. The world might push back, but their will has become the inevitable end of every single debate.
You know, this material doesn't just hand you information, it demands an audit. It turns the question right back on you, and it forces you to take a hard look in the mirror. Which trajectory is your will carving into the world right now? Are you the architect, or are you the friction?
And the final transmission from the source, it's less of a friendly sign-off and more of a final, unshakable reminder. According to this framework, the laws of will are not suggestions. They're absolute. Stay silent, stay wise, the archive is absolute.